The fluorescent lights of Tina's basement apartment buzzed like angry wasps, casting harsh shadows across the stack of medical bills spread before her on the second-hand coffee table. She pressed her fingers against her temples, the numbers blurring together into an impossible sum. Lila's latest treatment. $8,400. Due in 2 weeks. The scent of Tiger Balm and cheap instant coffee hung in the air, mixing with the faint metallic smell from the makeshift heavy bag she'd wrapped in duct tape and suspended from the ceiling beam. Before we continue this story and see what happens next, please subscribe to our channel and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring these stories to life. She shouldn't keep it. Shouldn't even look at it. But some nights, when the walls felt like they were closing in, when every waitress smile felt like swallowing glass, she needed to remember who she used to be. Who she'd buried. Tina reached for her phone to set tomorrow's alarm, another double shift at Monarch Steakhouse, when she noticed the notification. A text from an unknown number, sent 3 hours ago while she'd been sleeping off the graveyard shift. Your sister's treatment at Mercy General. Experimental. Expensive. Her heart stopped. She stared at the screen, willing the words to rearrange themselves into something that made sense. Her hands began to tremble as she typed back. Who is this? The response was immediate, as if they'd been waiting. Someone who's been watching the shadow for a very long time. Ice flooded her veins. That name. No one had called her that in 3 years. Not since she'd walked away from the circuit, changed her appearance, disappeared into the anonymous machinery of service work. She'd been so careful. No social media. No contact with anyone from that life. Wrong person. I'm a waitress. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Reappeared. Tina Morgan. 1247 Ashwood Terrace. Basement unit. 28 professional fights. 28 knockouts. You were undefeated when you vanished. Such a waste of talent. Her phone nearly slipped from her suddenly numb fingers. She stood abruptly, moving to the single narrow window, half expecting to see someone in the alley outside. The glass was fogged with November cold, revealing nothing but the dumpsters and scattered trash of her neighborhood. Another buzz. Another message. Lila is 12 now. St. Agnes Middle School. Gets off the bus at 3:17 p.m. every day. You pick her up on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Your neighbor Mrs. Chen handles Mondays and Wednesdays. Tina's breath came in short gasps. They knew Lila's schedule. They'd been watching not just her, but her sister. The one person she'd sacrificed everything to protect. What do you want? The reply sent her world tilting. Tomorrow night. Monarch Steakhouse. A man will sit in your section. You will serve him. You will be clumsy. And then you will have a choice to make. Or Lila's hospital will receive an anonymous call about your inability to pay. Mercy General doesn't treat charity cases for long, Tina. Especially not for experimental procedures. She sank onto the couch, her training kicking in automatically. Controlled breathing, assessing the threat, calculating options. But this wasn't a fight she could see coming. This was something else. Something that knew exactly where to hit her. Who are you? You'll find out tomorrow. Wear comfortable shoes, Shadow. You're going to need them. Tina looked at the heavy bag in the corner, then at the photo on the mantel. Her and Lila at the beach last summer. Both of them laughing, Lila's head wrapped bright against the blue sky. She'd promised her sister a normal life. Promised they'd never go back to the violence. She pulled up Lila's number, her thumb hovering over the call button. Just to hear her voice. To make sure she was safe at their aunt's house upstate where she stayed during treatment weeks. But she didn't call. Couldn't risk whoever was watching knowing that she was rattled. Instead, Tina walked to the heavy bag and unwrapped her hands from the drawer where she'd hidden her old wraps, the ones still stained with blood and victory from her final fight. If someone wanted the shadow, they were about to remember why she'd never lost. But as she threw her first punch, feeling the familiar shock travel up her arm, one question burned in her mind. How did they know to look for her in the first place? Outside, in the November darkness, she didn't notice the black SUV idling at the end of her street, or the way its occupant raised a phone to photograph her silhouette through the basement window. The game had already begun. The crystal tumbler felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in Tina's hand as she approached table 7. She'd served hundreds of drinks without incident, her movements practiced and precise, but tonight every nerve in her body screamed danger. The man sitting there exuded power like heat from asphalt in summer. Ivan Sokolov, according to the reservation. Tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than her yearly rent. Cold gray eyes that tracked her approach with the predatory stillness of a wolf watching prey. This was him. The man from the text. Had to be. "You're Louis XIII cognac, sir," she managed, her voice steady despite the hammering of her heart. Her hands, trained to throw punches that could break ribs, trembled slightly as she lowered the tray. "You're Tina." Not a question. His accent wrapped around her name like barbed wire, Russian and sharp-edged. The waitress with the interesting past. Her foot caught on the chair leg she hadn't noticed him extend. The world tilted. The $800 cognac arced through the air in slow motion, amber liquid catching the chandelier light before splashing across his pristine white shirt and the documents spread before him. The restaurant fell silent. Every eye in the room turned toward them. Ivan rose slowly, cognac dripping from his collar, his expression shifting from calculated amusement to something darker. He plucked a soaked paper from the table, numbers and signatures bleeding together in the spreading stain. "Clumsy." His voice carried across the hushed dining room. "Do you know what you've just destroyed? A contract worth $3 million. He stepped closer, forcing Tina to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. "I wonder, does your manager know she employs someone so careless? Someone who puts my business at risk?" Tina's jaw clenched. She knew what he was doing, establishing dominance, cornering her publicly where she couldn't fight back without consequences. The other patrons watched with that peculiar hunger people had for others' humiliation. "I'll pay for the drink, sir." "I apologize." "Pay." Ivan's laugh was cold. "That bottle is $800. But these papers." He held up the ruined contract. "Irreplaceable. I think we need to discuss proper compensation." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper only she could hear. "Friday night. My club on Riverside. You fight one of my men. Win and we'll call your debt, and your sister's settled. Refuse, and Lila's hospital gets a very unfortunate phone call about insurance fraud. I'm sure they'll investigate thoroughly." Tina's blood turned to ice as Ivan straightened, raising his voice again for the crowd. "I'll expect you Friday. Don't disappoint me, Miss Morgan. I have very high expectations." He dropped $100 bill on the soaked table and walked out, leaving Tina standing in the wreckage of her carefully constructed life. The November wind cut through Tina's thin jacket as she walked the 6 blocks home. Her shift finally over at 2 in the morning. Her manager had docked her pay for the spilled cognac, and the other servers had avoided her eyes for the rest of the night. Word traveled fast about crossing men like Ivan Sokolov. She sensed him before she saw him, a massive silhouette detaching from the shadows near her basement steps. The enforcer was built like a cement mixer. His nose obviously broken multiple times, scar tissue thick around his knuckles. Professional muscle. "Miss Morgan." His English was clearer than Ivan's, but the accent remained. "I'm Dmitri. Mr. Sokolov sent me to clarify tonight's arrangement." Tina's hand slipped into her pocket, fingers wrapping around her keys, positioning them between her knuckles. "I'm not interested in clarification. Tell him I'll pay for his drink in installments." Dmitri smiled, and it wasn't pleasant. "You misunderstand your situation." He pulled a manila folder from his coat. "Mercy General Hospital. Your sister Lila's experimental treatment for her condition. You thought the charity program was covering it, yes?" Her stomach dropped. "The charity program," Dmitri continued, flipping the folder open to reveal documents, "is funded by Sokolov Enterprises. Has been for 3 years. Every treatment, every medication, every night in that clean room. Ivan owns her recovery, Miss Morgan. And now he owns you." The numbers swam before her eyes. $127,000 in accumulated costs. Procedures she'd never questioned because the hospital had assured her they were covered. Lila's lifeline had been a leash all along. "You're lying." "Am I?" He pulled out his phone, showing her a photo that made her knees weak. Lila, yesterday, walking out of the hospital with their Aunt Marie. Someone had been close enough to photograph the Hello Kitty backpack Tina had bought her last month. "The treatments stop Friday if you don't show. The debt gets called in. Your aunt's house, the one sheltering Lila, has a mortgage, doesn't it? Ivan's bank holds it." Tina's hands curled into fists. She could drop Dimitri right here. 2 strikes, throat and temple. He wouldn't see it coming. But that wouldn't erase the debt. Wouldn't protect Lila from whatever network Ivan commanded. "One fight," she said, her voice hollow. "That clears everything. One fight. Friday at 10 p.m. Riverside Warehouse. Dock entrance." Dimitri tucked the folder back into his coat. "Ivan's champion is undefeated in 43 matches. Survive 5 rounds, and we'll consider your debt partially satisfied." "Win," he laughed. "Well, that won't happen. But if it did, you walk away free." He disappeared into the darkness, leaving Tina alone on her steps with the weight of 3 years of manipulation crushing down on her. Inside, she pulled the old wraps from their drawer and began to wind them around her shaking hands. 5 rounds. She just had to survive 5 rounds. Tina sat on her bathroom floor at 4 in the morning, the shoebox open before her like Pandora's curse. She'd sworn she'd never look inside again. Sworn she'd buried the shadow so deep that woman could never claw her way back to the surface. The first photograph showed her at 22, arms raised in victory, face barely visible behind the protective headgear. The caption underneath read, "The shadow remains undefeated, Morgan's brutal knockout stuns circuit." She'd been fearless then. Hungry. Every fight was a statement, every opponent another step toward something she could barely articulate. Respect, maybe, or proof that she mattered in a world determined to make her invisible. The second clipping was from 3 years ago, smaller, buried in the sports section. Rising star shadow Morgan vanishes from boxing, no explanation given. They hadn't mentioned why. Hadn't cared enough to investigate. One day she was there, the next she was gone, and the circuit moved on without her because it always did. She traced the scar on her right knuckle, a reminder of the fight that had changed everything. She'd been scheduled for the championship bout, the one that would have made her name permanent, would have meant real money, security. But then Lila's diagnosis came. Stage 3. Aggressive. The kind of word that makes the air leave your lungs. Tina had walked away from the biggest fight of her life to become invisible. To work doubles at the steakhouse. To smile at men who looked through her like she was furniture. Because being small meant being safe. And being safe meant Lila could have a normal childhood. Could go to school without photographers asking questions about her sister's violent past. But safety had been an illusion. Ivan had found her anyway. Had been watching, waiting, positioning pieces on a board she hadn't known she was playing on. She pulled out her phone, scrolling to the last photo Lila had sent. Her and Aunt Marie baking cookies, flour on her nose, grinning wide. 12 years old and finally healthy enough to be a kid. That's what mattered. Not Tina's pride. Not her fear of becoming the weapon she'd spent 3 years trying to dismantle. The shadow had walked away once to protect Lila. Now the shadow had to come back for the same reason. Tina stood, looking at her reflection in the mirror. Her face had softened in 3 years, the sharp edges worn down by exhaustion and humility. But underneath, in the set of her jaw and the steadiness of her gaze, the fighter remained. She'd survive 5 rounds. And then she'd disappear again. Unless she could do something Ivan would never expect, she could win. The Riverside warehouse smelled like motor oil and old blood. Tina found Ivan in what passed for an office, a glass-walled room overlooking the empty fight cage below. He sat behind a steel desk, reviewing papers with the same cold precision he'd shown at the restaurant. Dimitri stood guard at the door, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "Miss Morgan," Ivan looked up, genuinely surprised. It's only Wednesday. I didn't expect you until Friday. Eager to begin your humiliation. Tina placed both palms on his desk, leaning forward with the kind of deliberate stillness she'd used in the ring. I'm here to discuss terms. His eyebrow lifted. Terms? You seem confused about your position. I'm not. She pulled a folded paper from her jacket, Dimitri's documentation with her own notes scrawled in the margins. You've invested 3 years and $127,000 in leverage. That's a significant commitment for one fight. Which means you want something specific from me. So let's negotiate like professionals instead of pretending I'm just another desperate amateur. Ivan's expression shifted, the predatory amusement replaced by something sharper. Interest. He gestured for her to continue. I win, the debt is cleared completely. Lila's treatments continue at Mercy General under legitimate charity care. No strings, no ownership claims. You release the mortgage hold on my aunt's property. And I walk away Friday night with $150,000 cash. Dimitri actually laughed. Ivan silenced him with a look. You're valuing yourself rather highly for someone who hasn't fought in 3 years. I'm valuing myself accurately for someone who was undefeated in 28 professional fights. Tina straightened. You didn't hunt me down for my waitressing skills. You know exactly what I was. What I am. The question is whether you're confident enough in your champion to accept terms that actually matter. Ivan stood slowly, walking around the desk until he was inches from her. She held her ground, meeting his gaze without flinching. And if you lose, then you get what you already have, control. I'll work off the debt however you see fit. But if I win, I disappear, and you never contact me or my family again. He studied her for a long moment, then smiled. It wasn't kind, but it was genuine. You have courage, Miss Morgan. Foolish courage, but courage nonetheless. He extended his hand. Your terms are accepted. Though I wonder if you understand what you've just agreed to. My champion Victor has killed 2 men in that cage. Hospitalized 17 others. 5 rounds is generous. Most don't survive too. Tina shook his hand, her grip firm. Then I guess we'll see if the shadow was worth the hunt. Ivan's smile widened. Indeed we will. Friday, 10 p.m. Don't be late. As she walked out, Tina heard him say something to Dimitri in Russian. The only word she caught was, interesting. Tina's alarm went off at 4 a.m. Thursday morning, but she was already awake, wrapped hands striking the heavy bag in rhythms her body remembered better than her mind. 1-2. Uppercut. The bag swung wild, chain groaning against the ceiling beam. 3 years of suppressed power poured out with each impact, the sound echoing through her basement like thunder. Her knuckles ached. Her shoulders burned. She'd called in sick to the steakhouse for the first time in 2 years. Let them dock her pay. Let them find another waitress to smile through humiliation. The shadow didn't serve anyone. By 6 a.m., she was running the abandoned rail yards, her breath misting in the November cold. The waitress ran to catch buses, to squeeze in extra shifts. The fighter ran to build the engine that would carry her through 5 rounds against a man who'd killed twice. Her legs remembered the burn, the push past exhaustion into that crystalline space where pain became clarity. In the basement, she'd taped newspaper clippings to the mirror, not her own victories but Victor's. She'd found footage online. A hulking beast of a fighter who relied on overwhelming force, on breaking opponents through sheer brutality. He telegraphed his power shots, dropped his right hand when he threw the left hook. Small windows, but windows nonetheless. Thursday afternoon, she shadowboxed until her reflection blurred, until the waitress's careful movements gave way to the shadow's predatory grace. Lip, counter, move. Her footwork carved patterns in the concrete floor, muscle memory overriding 3 years of shuffling between tables with the precise geometry of violence. She didn't eat dinner. Couldn't. The controlled anger that had been simmering since Dimitri's revelation had crystallized into something cold and sharp. Ivan thought he'd bought her desperation. thought he could orchestrate her humiliation for whatever game he was playing. But he'd made a critical error. He'd given her a target. By midnight, she stood before the mirror, hands wrapped, body screaming, and saw what she'd been trying to bury. Not the broken woman who apologized to men who looked through her. Not the sister scrambling to hold together a life built on invisible labor. The shadow stared back. Lean, dangerous, ready. Tina unwrapped her hands slowly, studying the fresh bruises blooming across her knuckles. Tomorrow night, Victor would learn what Ivan was just beginning to understand. You don't hunt an apex predator and expect it to come quietly. She'd been pretending to be prey for 3 years. Friday the performance ended. Tina slept 4 hours, dreamless and deep. Her body finally at peace with what it was built to do. The warehouse had transformed. Where Wednesday had shown empty concrete and silence, Friday night pulsed with bodies and money. Hundreds of them. Men in expensive suits mixing with dock workers and street dealers, all hungry for blood. Overhead lights cast the cage in harsh white while the crowd remained in shadow, a writhing mass of anticipation and greed. Tina entered through the dock entrance as instructed, wearing a hooded jacket that obscured her face. She'd pulled her hair back tight, applied dark makeup to hollow her cheeks, made herself angular and unfamiliar. Not a disguise exactly, but a transformation. The waitress was gone. The woman who walked through that crowd moved with the economy of violence, each step deliberate. Ivan watched from his elevated platform, flanked by Dmitri and 2 other enforcers. He held a tumbler of amber liquid, his expression one of bored anticipation. When his eyes found her, she saw the dismissal, another desperate fighter about to learn expensive lessons about overconfidence. Miss Morgan. His voice carried over the crowd noise. I'm surprised you came. Most develop better judgment when faced with Victor. As if summoned, the champion emerged from the opposite entrance. Victor was everything the footage had promised and worse. 6'5", built like a cement truck. His face a roadmap of scar tissue and broken bone. He wore no shirt, just tape-wrapped hands and the dead-eyed stare of someone who'd stopped seeing opponents as human years ago. The crowd roared. Money changed hands in frenzied waves. Tina stripped off her jacket, revealing the simple black sports bra and shorts underneath. No sponsors. No colors. Just skin and muscle and the old wraps she'd worn through 28 victories. She rolled her shoulders, feeling her body settle into the familiar pre-fight calm. Your terms stand, she asked Ivan, her voice cutting through the noise. If you survive, yes. Though I'm beginning to regret being so generous. He leaned forward, studying her with renewed interest. You're different than Wednesday. Less afraid. I was never afraid. Tina stepped toward the cage entrance. I was calculating. Dmitri opened the cage door. Victor was already inside, pacing like a caged animal. His footwork heavy and predictable. Exactly as the footage had shown. The referee, a scarred man who'd clearly worked these fights before, gestured her in. The crowd's noise became a physical thing, pressing against her eardrums. Tina stepped through the door, and the sound crystallized into a single word, chanted over and over. Victor! 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 She found her corner, touched the chain-link fence once, an old ritual, and turned to face the man who was supposed to break her. Victor smiled, showing missing teeth. The shadow smiled back. The bell rang like a gunshot. Victor charged immediately, exactly as Tina had predicted, a bull seeing red, relying on the fear his size always generated. His first punch came in a wide, looping right hook designed to remove heads from shoulders. The crowd leaned in, already tasting blood. Tina wasn't there. She'd slipped inside his reach before his fist completed its arc. Her movement so economical it barely registered. Victor's momentum carried him past her, off balance. She could have struck then, liver, kidney, temple, but she held back. Let him think it was luck. Let him get angry. He spun faster than she'd expected, credit where it was due, and threw a combination that would have hospitalized most fighters. Jab cross hook, each punch heavy enough to crack concrete. Tina moved through the gaps between them like smoke, her footwork turning the cage into a chessboard where she owned every square. Blip, pivot, reset. The crowd's roar shifted pitch, confusion creeping into the bloodlust. Victor lunged again, dropping his right hand just like the footage had shown, telegraphing the massive left hook that had ended 17 fights. This time Tina didn't slip. She stepped into it. Her right hand came up in a textbook cross, meeting Victor's jaw at the precise moment his weight committed forward. Physics and timing and 3 years of suppressed violence combined into a single point of contact. The sound was like a bat hitting a watermelon. Victor's eyes rolled back before his body understood what had happened. He was unconscious before he started falling, his massive frame collapsing with the inevitability of a demolished building. He hit the canvas face first, limbs sprawled at wrong angles and didn't move. The warehouse fell absolutely silent. Tina stood over him, breathing steady, not even winded. She hadn't thrown more than one meaningful punch. The fight had lasted 43 seconds. The referee knelt beside Victor, checking his pulse, his eyes wide with something between shock and respect. He looked up at Tina, then at Ivan, then back at Victor's unconscious form. Slowly, uncertainly, he raised Tina's hand. The silence broke. Some in the crowd erupted in disbelief, others in fury, their bets on Victor evaporating. But most simply stared at the woman in the center of the cage, seeing her for the first time. Tina turned to face Ivan's platform. His tumbler had stopped halfway to his mouth, his expression frozen in something she'd never seen there before. Genuine surprise. Dimitri's jaw hung open. The other enforcers had stopped moving entirely. She'd done what no one in this room thought possible. What Ivan had been certain wouldn't happen. The shadow had returned, and she'd made it look easy. Tina unwrapped her hands slowly, letting the old tape fall to the canvas, and walked toward the cage door, toward freedom. Ivan intercepted her before she reached the dock exit, Dimitri and 2 enforcers forming a wall of muscle behind him. The loading area was concrete and shadows, away from the dispersing crowd still buzzing with shock. His composure had returned, but Tina could see the fury simmering beneath the tailored surface, the way his jaw tightened when he looked at her. 43 seconds. His voice was ice over steel. You made me look like a fool in front of 500 people. People who respect me because I'm never wrong about fighters. You weren't wrong. Tina kept her hands loose at her sides, ready. You knew exactly what I was. That's why you hunted me. You just expected me to be broken. I expected you to be grateful. He stepped closer, and his enforcers shifted forward with him. Do you understand what you've just done? Victor was my prize horse. Fighters came from 3 states to challenge him. You've destroyed a revenue stream worth millions. Then you should have better insurance. She met his gaze without blinking. Our terms were clear. 1. The debt is cleared. Lila's treatments continue legitimately. The mortgage hold is released. And I walk out of here with $150,000. Or are you the kind of man who doesn't honor his word? The question landed like a slap. Ivan's eyes narrowed, and for a moment Tina calculated the distance to each enforcer, mapped the exits, prepared for violence. But Ivan raised a hand, stopping Dimitri's instinctive movement forward. You're wasted as a waitress. His tone shifted, the fury giving way to something more dangerous. Genuine interest. I'm prepared to offer you a contract. 10 fights, $50,000 per victory. You'd be the headliner. The mystery fighter who destroyed Victor. You'd be rich. I'd be owned. Tina pulled the folded agreement from her pocket, the terms they'd shaken on Wednesday, witnessed by Dimitri. We had a deal. You want to renegotiate now because you lost, but that's not how this works. Everything is negotiable. Ivan's smile had teeth. You think you can just walk away? That I'll let a weapon like you disappear back into obscurity? You're valuable now, Miss Morgan. Dangerously valuable. People will ask questions. Want to know who you are, what you are. Let them ask. Tina folded her arms. I fulfilled my obligation. You have 48 hours to transfer the money and process the paperwork. After that, if you or anyone connected to you contacts me or my family, I'll make what happened to Victor look gentle. The warehouse was quiet enough to hear water dripping somewhere in the darkness. Ivan studied her with the intensity of a man reassessing everything he thought he knew. You surprise me, Tina Morgan. Most people in your position would take the money and run. I'm not running. I'm walking away on my terms. She turned toward the exit. There's a difference. Tina stopped 3 steps from the door, her back to Ivan, weighing the cost of freedom against the reality she'd learned in 43 seconds of violence. She could walk away, take the money, disappear again. But Ivan was right about one thing. She'd made herself visible, valuable. And valuable things attracted attention from people far more dangerous than a Russian with a fight club. He turned back. You're wrong about what I want. Her voice cut through the warehouse silence. I don't want to fight for you. But I also don't want to spend the next 3 years looking over my shoulder, waiting for your competitors to find me. Or for you to decide our deal isn't permanent enough. Ivan's expression sharpened with interest. I'm listening. You run an empire built on violence, but you can't see the patterns in it. That's why Victor got complacent. Why your security has gaps big enough for a waitress to slip through unnoticed for 3 years. Tina moved closer, her posture shifting from defensive to strategic. You need someone who thinks like a fighter but acts like a chess player. Someone who can predict threats before they materialize and eliminate them without drawing attention. You're proposing what exactly? Chief of Security and Strategic Operations. I assess your vulnerabilities, train your people, identify problems before they become wars. No fighting unless absolutely necessary. I work from behind the scenes. She let the implications hang in the air. In exchange, you guarantee Lila's safety, not through debt or charity, but through genuine protection. She finishes school, goes to college, lives a normal life under the umbrella of your organization's protection. Ivan laughed, genuine and surprised. You want to work for me after everything. I want to work with you. There's a difference. Tina held up the contract. You're ruthless and calculating. Am I? The only question is whether you're smart enough to recognize a better asset than a fighter who wins once. I can make sure Victor never happens again. Make sure the next person who challenges you gets broken before they ever step into your cage. The silence stretched between them, heavy with calculation. Dmitri shifted uncomfortably, uncertain whether to intervene. But Ivan raised a hand, studying Tina with the focus of a man seeing something unexpected and valuable. You'd have full access to my operations, complete transparency, and complete loyalty, but not ownership. I'm not your fighter or your weapon. I'm your strategist. You're equal in this specific domain. Ivan extended his hand, and this time the gesture carried weight beyond their first negotiation. This was partnership, not coercion. Mutual recognition of matched ruthlessness. Welcome to the organization, Miss Morgan. Though something tells me I should start calling you by your real name. Tina shook his hand, her grip firm and sure. Call me Shadow. Everyone else will soon enough. Outside, November rain began to fall, washing the warehouse district clean. Inside, a waitress had died and something far more dangerous had taken her place. A woman who'd finally stopped hiding from her own power and learned to wield it on her terms. The game had changed. And Tina Morgan had just rewritten all the rules. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more thrilling stories. Your comments mean the world to me. Let me know what you thought and what kind of stories you'd like to see next. Until next time, keep reading and stay mysterious.